our Super PAC is sunshineonearth.com. Anybody wants to look at it. If you don't agree with it, you don't agree with it, that's fine. But at least give them the chance to see the ads if they agree with it and they want to make a contribution. Because Super PACs have no limits. No contribution is too small or too big. Okay, this is the new Super PAC ad. It says new Super PAC ad exposes the Democratic Party as anti-Semitic, anti-Israel, anti-American, pro-Hamas.
The following has been paid for by sunshineonearth.com.
Who are all these Americans that hate Israel, hate Jews, and by extension hate America? They are the new base of today's Democratic Party. Hi, I'm Stephen Marks, and this is the first Super PAC ad you're ever going to see with no slick production, just me speaking. All across America, on campuses and elsewhere, we're hearing Americans on American soil chanting, "Death to America, death to Israel, pro-Hamas," and the worst anti-Semitism ever heard in American history. Why did it take President Biden 7 months to finally criticize these people? Because he needs their votes. They are the new base of today's Democratic Party. Biden has surrendered to this base by becoming the first president in American history to threaten Israel with cutting off all military aid to fight terrorism, as he demands that Israel stop attacking Hamas, but making no demands on Hamas to release all those hostages, including American hostages. Kamala Harris, Chuck Schumer, and Nancy Pelosi have echoed this Israel bashing, demanding that the president of Israel resign while making no demands upon Hamas's leadership to resign and be replaced by peaceful Palestinians. But it gets worse. President Biden was the keynote speaker honoring America's most well-known anti-Semite, the Reverend Al Sharpton, who incited the burning down of a Jewish-owned store in Harlem, killing 8 innocent people, and said, "If the Jews want to get it on, tell them to pin back their yarmulkes and come to my house." And what did Kamala Harris have to say to Mr. Sharpton? "I love you, Rev." I'm not making this up, folks. All this anti-Semitism today in America is coming from the left, from the leadership of today's Democratic Party, and from this despicable base of today's new Democratic Party. If you'd like to contribute to help us air this ad as often as possible, go to sunshineonearth.com. Thank you.
Good afternoon, beautiful people. Welcome to another episode of Kiko's Freethinkers Forum. This is episode 124, and I'm presented with 2 special guests, Kadin McElwain and Stephen Marks. Kadin McElwain and Stephen Marks have worked together to create a super PAC called Sunshine on Earth. And additionally to this, Stephen Marks is a political consultant. We're obviously going to be having a political discussion. I'm curious about how PACs are formed versus super PACs. We're going to talk about the state of politics in the United States. We have an election cycle as usual. It seems like every time we look, we have a 2-year cycle or a 4-year cycle. You have local elections going on, everything else, the whole 9 yards. And Stephen is also the author of a book called Confessions of a Political Hitman. So I may mention that or not in the interview, maybe not, I don't know. But this should be a quite the episode, let me tell you that much, because we have different audiences watching this. My audience is pretty diverse, and I'm sure that Stephen and Kadin's audience will get some joy out of this episode. I just want to say thanks to both of y'all for accepted the invitation, and welcome to the show. Thank you so much. Well, thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
And before we get started, I am curious, how did you all find out about this show? Well, Kate would answer that one.
Yeah, well, all right. I started working for the Super PAC in March of this year, and one of the tasks was to find as many different media platforms as possible to promote the Super PAC on. So I did some digging around, and I saw the show because I was also working for independent candidate Jasmine Sermon at the time, and I saw that they were on your show. So I commented on your thing, "Hey, how do we go about being on the show?" And as the old saying goes, the rest is history.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Definitely. Now, I was just curious about it because there's been like 5 or 6 different requests in the last few months. And I'm like, how are these people finding out this small independent YouTube channel? But I'm glad you all did find out about me. It makes me happy because anyone who's interested in coming onto the show, sure, you come onto the show. I don't care what your views are, honestly. If you have an interest in the show, that means that there's obviously something that you want to discuss. And so I welcome all types of views. And I think my audience knows this. The biggest complaint I had up until this point.
You're world renowned. Everybody knows who you are. So, you know, it's true.
That is true. This stuff never goes away once it's on the internet. But I guess my question is, how do you all know each other? Like, that's the question I have.
Oh, through a mutual friend, I was looking for somebody to help me do a lot of my generation. We're, how would you say, mechanically challenged. And we don't know anything about using the internet, using computers, anything that requires, you know, brain capacity. Now, Kaden's generation, you know, so I needed somebody that would know how to find stuff online, internet research, how to find people like you, exactly what he did, and so and many other things. So I asked a friend of mine who's a professor at Kent State University, who happens to be one of Kaden's professors. And I said, do you know somebody that can do this, and this? And I rattled off all these things. And she said, yes, I have the perfect person. It's Kaden. So that's, it was just through dumb luck, actually.
Wow. See, I was under the impression that y'all, like, so how did this Super PAC come together? Like, I'm so interested in this. Like, how did this come together? The idea of the Super PAC, and ultimately, how did you all come together to work on it together?
Okay, I'll tell you how that happened. I personally have been doing Super PAC ads for all the presidential elections since 2000, working mostly for Republicans against the Democrats. And I did one against, I think you've seen one against Gore, one against Kerry, one against Obama, actually two against Obama. One where Obama was mocking and ridiculing the Bible and the Sermon on the Mount, basically calling Jesus a moron. And when that Super PAC ad came out, first he denied the footage. He said the footage was fake. Then he said the footage is out of context. And the thing did so much damage. It was before the bank crash in 08. I don't know if you're old enough to remember, but the polls were dead even between McCain and Obama. Anyway, that's another story. So for this year's, what happens in every election, and I've been a political consultant since 1994. I lived in Washington until fairly recently, but I developed something called cold-induced asthma, where I had to go to a warmer climate out to Florida. But that's besides the point. The point is, in every election, I see whoever the Republican presidential candidates campaign and Super PACs are, they're always missing issues that are very, very important. So in 2000, my Super PAC ad showed that Al Gore was making a political alliance with Al Sharpton, who's going to be brought up again today. He's one of the biggest anti-Semites in America. And in 84, my ad showed that John Kerry, as a private lawyer, defended a guy who was a mobster that was the mastermind of the Gardner Museum heist in Boston, the largest unsolved robbery in American history. And then, the thing about Obama making fun of the Bible, the Republican campaigns were not using these issues. Nobody was using them, even their Super PACs. So once again, the Trump campaign and their Super PACs are not using these particular issues that we're going to bring up today that people have a right to know. That the Democratic Party has become the party that embraces anti-Semitism, anti-Israel, anti-America. And who are these people that you see? This is in the ad. You'll see me say the same thing. Who are these people out there yelling, hate America, hate Jews, hate Israel, pro-Hamas? Who are they? This is the new base of today's Democratic Party. And why did it take Joe Biden 7 months to finally criticize these lunatics on the college campuses who were, being violent and so anti-Semitic? It took him 7 months. You know why? He needs their votes. This is the new base of the Democratic Party. These complete radicals. Now, the anti-Semitism is not new. We've had Sharpton and Farrakhan and Jeremiah Wright being embraced by Democrats for a long time. But now it's so out in the open with the college campuses. This is an issue not just against Jewish people, but anybody who's pro-America is pro-Israel. anybody who's pro-Israel is pro-America. And these people on the college campuses, they hate Israel and America. And the fact that the teachers and the administrators are on the campuses protesting along with them, spewing this hatred of Israel, these kids are getting indoctrinated because those professors and administrators, they're from my generation, the baby boomers, the lowlife that were in Vietnam during the Vietnam years. They were out in the streets burning the American flag and, you know, doing all kinds of really bad, starting riots in the 60s. Those are now the professors that are indoctrinating these kids into this anti-Semitism and this anti-American. And that's one story. But the fact is, the Democrats have now embraced them. Again, as you know, there are two Arab congresswomen, one in Minnesota, one in Michigan, who flat out said Israel doesn't have the right to exist. But nobody in the Democratic Party criticizes them. But can you imagine the Republican Party embracing the head of the Ku Klux Klan? I don't know if you're old enough to remember, Kiko, when in Louisiana, David Duke, who was the Grand Wizard of the Ku Klux Klan, was actually a Republican nominee for governor. Mm-hmm. The Republican Party, the RNC, told voters in Louisiana to vote for the Democrat, even though he was dirty and ended up in jail, this guy, Edward Edwards. Whatever reason, Republicans are you could say they're weak or you could say they're honest. We get rid of our bad apples. You know, the congressman from New York that got in, that was thrown out of the party. Mm-hmm. You know, the guy that lied about everything, and he's going to probably end up in jail. Republicans threw him out. But the Democrats, they don't throw out those two Arab congresswomen that say these things. They don't disavow people within their party or any of those college like I said, that's their base.
I got a question.
The people in the middle need to know, in the center, that haven't decided how to vote yet, the swing vote that's going to decide this election. They have to know two things. Number one, this anti-Semitic, anti-America, anti-Israel, these lunatics all over the country, they are the base of the Democratic Party today, number one. Our second Super PAC ad is why the Super PAC is called Sunshine on Earth. When President Trump was president, there was peace all over the world. But as soon as President Biden came in, his weakness in Afghanistan, he let the Taliban take over without firing a single shot. The next day, or very soon after that, was the invasion by Putin on the Ukraine, and then the terrorist attack against Israel. There is no way, had President Trump been president, that, first of all, there's no way Hamas and Iran would have pulled that, because as you know, in the classified documents case, one of them showed a classified document. Here's what we're going to do in Iran if they try to pull something stupid. They wouldn't have had the balls to do it. They would have been petrified of Donald Trump, the same way the Russians were petrified of Ronald Reagan in the 80s and helped us end the Cold War. Our second, but when President Biden comes in, that weakness in Afghanistan led to the war between Russia and the Ukraine. Wouldn't have happened under Biden, because Biden was very close and had great relations with both Putin and Zelensky. He would have never allowed that to happen. And if you remember, he also made a peace deal with North Korea and China, you know, in his first years. But, you know, this is all kind of not noticed during the Trump years because of COVID. But all these things led to peace in the world. So that's what Sunshine on Earth is about. It's about, if Trump were to be president again, hopefully we've been dragged into all these wars all over the world because of President Biden's weakness. And we had sunshine on earth when President Trump was president. That's the one ad. The other ad, I know I'm repeating myself, is the Democratic Party. And this is all related because of that attack on Israel. And then Israel fights back. And all these people are protesting against Israel. Like it's Israel's fault. Now, maybe you can criticize the way Netanyahu's handled this, but they didn't start this thing. And here's the problem with the peace treaty going on right now. Anything short of the complete destruction of Hamas, when this is over, even if hostages are let go and there's ceasefire and everything's peaceful, you know what that means? That means Hamas has won this war. In other words, they're not being held accountable for what they did, the original attack, and they're still going to be out there.
let's get Kate in. Let's get Kate in this conversation because I'm just I have so many questions. How do I respond to that? But I guess my question: you all are working on this ad together. Are there things in your own ad that you have hesitation about, or you just 100% all in on the Sunshine on Earth ad? That question is for Caden, and then Stephen, you can answer the same question.
I would have to say no. I think both ads went smoothly, but I think in Iran there's going to be some peace because now the president's out of the picture. He passed in a helicopter crash this year, so if we're lucky, maybe the new leader is someone who likes peace.
And but as far as my actual question, so as far as the Sunshine on Earth, there's no and clearly you all produced the ad is not going to be something where I guess it's kind of a self-criticism. Is there something about the ad that you think that would be more effective, or is there something that's missing within the context of the ad? I guess is my question, because I know that the point of the ad may be different than the average voter who is looking to support a certain candidate or not.
Right. Well, the problem is America is basically a very isolationist country.
It is.
And during the Reagan years, people at first very much opposed his military buildup. It seemed very provocative. But in the end, the people supported it when we won the Cold War. So sometimes FDR ran his third term in 1940 on not promising never to bring American troops into World War II. People are very isolationist. But then when we're successful, that's what great leaders do. They do things that are against the public will, that are right, and in the end, they get the public to go along with it. John Kennedy's book, Profiles and Courage, is about presidents that did things that were politically unpopular that turned out to be great. And what's happening right now is the country is very isolationist, but I believe, for whatever my opinion is worth, the only way you're going to stop, the only place in the world where they have a nuclear weapon where they can do that's going to do damage is in Iran. The other countries that have nuclear weapons, Russia, China, Britain, France, us, we're not going to start any world wars. But these guys, they are religious fanatics. They think if they start a nuclear war, they're going to see Allah tomorrow and have 77 versions. So you're dealing with not normal people. They are the only threat left in the world with nuclear weapons. So basically, if we don't take care of them now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, we're going to have to do it at some point. This is what Netanyahu is trying to explain to people. And it's going to be much worse. So I'm shocked. I was shocked when Iran bombed Israel. First time Israel's been attacked since the Yom Kippur War in 1978, over 50 years. Biden had a perfect excuse. Just take out Iran. The way we took out, it took us to take out Saddam Hussein out of Kuwait, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. He had the world's fourth largest army, but we had smart bombs. We were able to take him out in 2 to 3 weeks. We have to take out Iran, unfortunately. Otherwise, Hamas will continue to exist. They'll continue to attack Israel. And at some point, they're going to get a nuclear weapon. And if we don't stop them now, and 10 years from now, and they have a nuclear weapon, it's going to be 10 times worse. Like if we hadn't stopped Hitler and the Japanese in World War II, and we did, they would have developed an atomic weapon before we did, possibly. So it's the same situation now. I don't know what's going to happen in Israel. Netanyahu's been handling this obviously very sloppy, and their intelligence is so poor. They don't know where those hostages are. Now, they did get 4 of them out the other day, but there's still 100 left. They don't know. They haven't infiltrated well enough, and neither have we. The United States has no intelligence over them. And not only that, some of these are American hostages. And what does President Biden do? Nothing. Well, he's pro-Israel one day, anti-Israel the next day. He's the only president in American history that's threatened Israel with taking away all military aid to fight terrorism if you don't get out of Gaza. But as we point out in the ad, he doesn't order Hamas to be replaced to resign. But the president of Israel, the Democrats Kamala Harris, Chuck Schumer, and Nancy Pelosi all demanded Netanyahu resign. But they don't ask the heads of Hamas to resign to be replaced by peaceful Palestinians. This is outrageous, and we have to let this pattern, whatever they're doing there, we have to see what happens. If they do have a ceasefire. But the problem is, if whatever the ending is, if Hamas is still allowed to exist, then they've won this war, and they will continue, and it will get worse. So, but regardless of that, whether you agree with that or not, is irrelevant to what this year's election and the fact that the Democrats are the party that embraces anti-Semitism, anti-Israel, anti-America, pro-Hamas, while the Republican Party, as you know, it goes back to Jimmy Carter. When you let these lunatics, they're all called the Ayatollah, 3 generations of them. They've been in control of Iran when the Shah got thrown out. And we're still suffering from Jimmy Carter's ineptitude. You still have these religious fanatics running that country. And if Israel or us does not do something to Iran, it's never going to end. And at some point, it's going to be much, much worse. And we have to deal with it now, or a potential world nuclear catastrophe where other countries get involved. We have to just take out Iran. But that's not even part of what our Super PAC ad says. Super PAC just says we need President Trump in there because he will support Israel. He will strongly oppose the anti-Semitism, the anti-Israel, the anti-America stuff going on in campuses, and hopefully we won't have all these people hating America so much. Plus, we'll have world peace because he will cut a deal between Russia and the Ukraine, and he will do something in Iran. I don't know what exactly, but he will be much stronger in helping us if the hostages aren't out by then. And Hamas isn't defeated by them. He will do what Ronald Reagan did to the Soviet Union, and what FDR did to the Nazis.
Kadin, do you have any response to what Stephen said or whatever? I'm just curious if you have any response to what he's saying.
I think now that the Iranian president is dead, like I said, maybe the new leader will step in and try to stop Hamas at least from developing. I don't know exactly how that works. When the leader of an original country dies and one steps in with her own agenda, but I think it's complicated in Iran now that the president who was encouraging this type of behavior is out of the picture. But I would like to add that the first ad, the second ad, the Sunshine on Earth ad itself, that was inspired by Ronald Reagan, the Good Morning ad, or whatever it was called.
Oh, okay.
The other issue, Kate, is even though this guy died, he's the president. But the Ayatollah is still there.
Right.
He's kind of a symbolic leader, and one's the real leader. The Ayatollah is still running that country. Who gave? And by the way, President Biden gave all that money. If you remember, $16 billion or whatever it was that we gave all that money back to Iran. It was from, the what's it called when you stop, like what we did with Russia. What's that word?
The sanctions.
What's that?
Sanctions.
Yeah, first President Obama and now President Biden are giving all this sanction money back to Iran. You got to believe that it was billions of dollars. A lot of that money had to have gone to this terrorist attack. So that terrorist attack, both President Biden has blood on his hands for giving them back that money, and we don't even bring that up. But it's important because first President Obama signed this peace treaty with Iran, which basically gives them a right to have nuclear weapons, and we're not even going to have what Reagan and Gorbachev called trust but verify, which means we could want to go to either other countries to see what they were doing at any time. We don't have the right to do that with Iran because President Obama signed this one-sided deal that let Iran do whatever they want, and then President Trump came in, you remember, and he took that treaty and he ripped it up and he literally flushed it down the toilet, literally, and he signed what's called the Abraham Accords, which just took away Iran's power to do that. and he even moved the American embassy to Jerusalem as a symbolic thing to show his support for Israel. Then President Biden comes in versus what President Trump did by giving them back all those billions of dollars in sanction money, which they have in all probability used to launch that terrorist attack in the first place.
Well, you may disagree with this based on what you've said, but there's clearly no lack of support for Israel in Congress. That's for sure. At least that's the view of the forum here. We're an independent forum. We don't support either political party because we see both sides are basically bought off by the same corporations, the same people. And it's been this way for years, and it's only getting worse. There was a point in time when independent third-party people had some traction on the national level, even at the local levels. But now it seems like it's a corporatocracy where the blue and the red team are basically the same side in the sense that they buy out everybody else to where they're the only two that's left at the end of the race each time. It would be just like the NBA having 30 teams and the same two teams make it to the finals every year because they're the only ones that get the fans. They're the only people who get the revenue, the support. I mean, I guess that would be the analogy that I would use. I mean, so I clearly see, I'll let Kate, first of all, I want to clear this up. I just want to confirm, you're clearly a Trump supporter. Are you a Trump supporter too, Kate? I'm just curious.
I think both political parties make good points, but there's a better way to approach it. To put it simply, I support LGBTQ rights. I just don't think it should be in elementary schools. And I support a woman's right to choose, but I'm pro-life, if that makes any sense. I think both sides make good points, but I think if they actually work together, like how politics used to be, then maybe there could be a balance of both viewpoints.
But how can there be a balance when, I mean, Stevens and you guys are literally producing a super PAC attacking the Democratic Party, which is totally fine. I couldn't care less for the Democratic Party. I'm not a Democrat, so it doesn't matter to me. But I'm just saying, neither side has an interest in that because it seems like to me both sides are there to like keep the other one out of office. You keep this side out of power, you keep this side out of power. But like, what are the actual issues? Like that's kind of what I'm missing with this. And just hearing Stephen earlier, everything that you talked about is almost contradictory to what you're saying in Sunshine on Earth. You're basically making the point that Trump didn't create any new wars, quote unquote, even though there were wars going on under his administration. He didn't technically create any new wars, but everything you've discussed has been pro-war. Bomb this country, bomb that country, pro-war, do this, do that. And a lot of people that I talk to that are Trump supporters are actually, why should we care about Israel? Why should we care about Palestine? Why should we care about Ukraine or anybody? If we're America first, why should we give a damn about any of those people over there? Like, I've heard a lot of Trump people say this. I'm not making it up.
Oh,
Well,
wow.
I'll respond. The reason, here's the problem. You're right that but here's why what I'm saying is not contradictory. Because if Trump had been president during this time, we wouldn't be in this situation where we now need to take out Iran, because they never would have dared that terrorist attack.
That's hypothetical, though. I think that's hypothetical.
But now that we're in the position, it's just cold, hard reality. We have to either take action against Iran or not take that action. But what I'm saying is, just like the Russians never tried anything crazy when Ronald Reagan was president, there's no way they would have done that had Trump been president. But now we're in this really bad situation where, and it's true, most Americans are isolationists. We don't want American boots on the ground if we do have to take out Hamas or take out Iran. But we can show the Israelis how to do it the same way Eisenhower showed the Koreans how to do it in the Korean War, in the same way Kennedy was trying to show the Vietnamese how to do it without boots on the ground before Lyndon Johnson put our troops there, which was stupid. But it can't be done. I mean, we do have the military know-how to teach the Israelis, to show the Israelis. And by the way, the other NATO countries would definitely, they're petrified just as much because of what Putin's doing in Ukraine. They're petrified of that because if he takes over the Ukraine, the next step is Poland and Germany, and they believe that Putin wants to create another, Soviet Union type thing. So Israel would not just have, even if they don't get any American support, they would get the support of the NATO countries, plus they would get the support of every other Arab country there. Those countries are threatened more by Iran than anyone else. The Saudis have no army. The Kuwaitis have no army. The Emirates have no army. Israel gives them protection. And after that first agreement was made with Obama, where he gave the store away to Iran, the guy from WikiLeaks released this telephone conversation with the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, who's on with Netanyahu, crying, begging, America stinks. They're not going to support us. Will you promise to support us if we're attacked with a nuclear weapon by Iran? And Netanyahu, he reassured him from his intelligence, and as you know, Israeli intelligence can't be that good if they had no idea what was about this terrorist attack. But he said, our intelligence shows they're many years away from putting that nuclear thing on a war, and don't worry about it. But yes, we will protect you. So that's one of the reasons why Israel gets the cheapest oil in the world, because these Arab countries give it to them in return for, their military help, and they know that Israel will come to their defense if they're attacked, if America will not. So we're unfortunately in a situation now, now there's another option I just thought of, which of course President Biden hasn't had the brains to figure out. If we can somehow get the Palestinian Authority, which used to rule Gaza, if we can get them back in charge and to replace Hamas, the Israelis had good relations with them, but something happened, I don't know, about 20 years ago.
Yeah, in 2006.
They didn't have an election, and Hamas basically took over power of Gaza from the Palestinian Authority. They're the ones that, if we can get them to be running things over there and completely get rid of Hamas, that would also be, and nobody except for me right now, to the best of my knowledge, has even mentioned that option.
That's a really good idea, Stephen. Honestly, if we wanted to, we could make that the next Super PAC, advocating for them returning into that position of power, those peaceful Palestinians.
Yeah, but
they're peaceful people, and the Israelis got along with them fine, but then they ceded power to Hamas because they were a little bit corrupt, and they promised to hold elections and they didn't. So Hamas said, "Well, we're going to hold an election." They haven't had any elections. They don't even. I mean, it's like ridiculous. But if we or the Israelis approach the Palestinian Authority, which right now is, against Israel because of what's happening over there, and said, "We want you in charge. We will give you the means to be in charge of Gaza and help us get rid of Hamas," that would be something I think that could work.
I guess there's a lot going on with what you're saying. And like I said, I think it is contradictory from my vantage point, because I think there may be a little bit of validity to the Russo-Ukrainian situation with Trump. He seemed to have a little bit more of a grasp with Putin, that relationship. But I still don't think that would have had anything to do with Russia and Ukraine, because their history goes way back. It predates the Soviet Union, honestly. But that has a lot to do with it. We've discussed it a lot on the forum in 2004. We've discussed the Orange Revolution, the Euromaidan. There are things that led up to that invasion last year. It didn't come out of thin air like the mainstream media makes it seem. So even then, I don't know if Trump would have had any control over Putin invading, because Putin was basically saying, if NATO keeps expanding, we have the right to basically attack back. And the whole point, and not to say that I'm not pro Putin, pro anything, but I'm just making the point that if the United States used that same rationale that Mexico was going to threaten us, that's kind of what people in Russia are saying. You guys wouldn't defend your border if Mexico was saying we're going to do something to you, or Canada going to do something to you. You mean to tell me the United States wouldn't react to that? I guess that's the point that they would be making on the other side. But I guess my thing is it's just a lot that you said, Stephen. It's just the thing about some of the people that I talk to on the ground is that they still would not. It's almost like you're talking as if you're from, like, as if you're Israel, but it's like we're the United States. We're not Israel. You're speaking as if you're in Israel versus like Hamas, but it's like we're in the United States. That still has nothing to do with us. I know
But they have our hostages there, our hostages. Not just and nobody even mentions it. So not just Israel. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No, you're good. You're good. I get that. I get that.
There. And President Biden has done zero. And in response to what you just said, I respectfully beg to differ with what you said, because it's true that Russia and Ukraine go way back in all kinds of disputes. But you think it's mere coincidence that under the 4 years of Trump, under Obama, under Clinton, under all those presidents, Russia never invaded the Ukraine, but all of a sudden, when the Taliban sashays through Afghanistan, takes over that country that we've spent 20 years and hundreds of billions of dollars on, without firing a single bullet, because Biden showed such incredible weakness. You're telling me it was mere coincidence that that's right after that the Russians went into the Ukraine. So
well, I'll give you this much. I definitely don't believe that these events are coincidental. There's definitely something to. I think that these personally, and I know that this channel gets a lot of flack for speculative views and conspiratorial views, but I believe that these events have to be created to keep the chaos going, because otherwise we're not focusing on the problems we have in our own place, in our own country. Because I see it as the U.S. empire coming, basically falling apart at the seams. Because before COVID, you had the COVID, we had that hysteria for what, 3-4 years. Then after COVID, you had the protests in the streets back in 2020. Every time you can't go to sleep without there being another event. Another event happens. Another event happens. Another war happens. Another event happens. To me, it's almost coordinated. And I believe that Netanyahu personally, I believe that Israel has internal strife. I think whether Trump or Biden was in, Israel was going under internal strife. Netanyahu's not that popular in circles over there. And I wouldn't doubt Netanyahu having something to do with almost letting the stuff happen with the Hamas situation. Because you mean to tell me one of the most protected borders in the world allowed something like that to happen October the 7th? It doesn't make sense to me. Israel has 3 levels of intelligence. And you mean to tell me they didn't know that was going to happen, or that wasn't a possibility of that happening?
No, they didn't know that was going to happen. And I'll give you circumstantial evidence. The Mossad and their intelligence is highly overrated. In 1978,
highly
the Yom
overrated.
Kippur War, on the morning of Yom Kippur, Egypt went in there and just bombed the hell out of them. It means they had no intelligence, right? The 6-Day War in 1967, even though now both wars Israel won, because in the Yom Kippur War, Nixon gave them a lot of weapons and they surrendered. You know, the bad guys, Syria and Egypt, surrendered. Thank God, Saddam made peace with Israel the very next year. But the point is that I forgot what I was going to say, but there's something you just said. The 2020 riots in the streets, that was also the fault, and every one of those cities was run by liberal Democrats who would not enforce the law. You saw it in Minnesota, you saw it in Seattle. The mayor of Seattle let a police station be taken over by BLM members who are out, in the middle of the night killing people, and black on black crime. And the police chief was either impeached or voted out, I don't know. But she was on TV, and they asked her, "Why are you allowing them to be She goes, it's the summer of love. I don't know if you remember this, but in every one of those cities where there were riots, and it was all, like I said, 99% of it was black on black crime. Those were in Chicago, in Detroit, in Seattle, in Minnesota. Those were Democratic, liberal mayors that allowed that to happen in 2020. And as you know, those cities and states have lost a lot of population, including New York. Went from 9 million people in New York City now to 7 million from the. And you know where those people are going? You know, they're going to Florida and Texas. And if you look at the last census, Florida and Texas gained congressional seats. New York lost. Illinois lost. Michigan lost. Minnesota lost. And California lost the most, where people are fleeing like crazy because of all the, crime over there. And that's another big problem. Is in the big cities is right now literally no enforcement. The BLM movement was the idea of Black Lives Matter. 99% of people agree with that. But the organization Black Lives Matter that was causing all this mayhem and killings in the streets, they during that summer, the Democrats didn't do anything. They actually even encouraged it and said they supported it. And it's caused terrible racial division in this country. And then you have first we had President Obama. He started it. Remember during the cop shootings, he blamed Whitey for everything. And some of those white cops were dirty when they killed those black guys, okay? But some of them weren't. There was one in Jasper, Maryland, where the bad guy got the gun away from the cop, and he ran away, and the cop was following him, and this guy turned around. He was on PCP. He turned around, and he was about to shoot the cop, and the cop blew his head off. And then Al Sharpton comes into town and tells everybody that guy said, hands up, don't shoot. Do you remember that whole thing with LeBron James walking around going, hands up, don't shoot? It never happened. So Obama was on TV when Jesse Jackson came into the city that night with the family of the dead black kid and called for calm. Sharpton came in and called for riots. And what did President Obama do? He made Al Sharpton his czar on race. Can you imagine this? And there were riots in the streets, and there was killings in the streets. It started, the racial division started with Obama.
It started with him.
Everything on Whitey, and then it continued with President Trump to some degree, Anglos versus Latinos with his issue of the wall. So we had two presidents in a row. Now, as you know, President Trump has made amends and is getting a lot of black and Latino votes now. But back in those days, he was divisive, and so was President Obama. And who knows how long that'll take to fix, because now because of President Obama, what was it, 15 years ago, whatever, you have a whole generation of very young black folks, like say 30 and under, or 40 and under, that believe in this what's called systemic racism, which means every black person, every second of their life is being discriminated against. Now, there's definitely discrimination, racism, but not in every single aspect. The systemic thing, because that's what the Democrats use to try to get their votes. And as President Trump points out, and even RFK Jr. points out, what has President Trump actually done in his 3.5 years to help black? Nothing.
No, I don't think none of the politicians are helping anybody out. It's not just black people. The working class has been completely stranded from both parties. Both parties are based on greed and fuel. Basically, to me, the way I see it, and it's like I'm kind of intrigued by your line of work, because it's just these PACs are really a part of the problem of the political process in this country. If you ask me, you're basically saying if you have the most money, you can buy out the population and win an election. Like, to me, that's the way I see it. I mean, it's not based on somebody using their brain, coming up with a decision, comparing a candidate versus another one. You're simply spending more ad money, spending more money on television to outspend the other side, to bombard the airwaves, the radio waves with just campaign after this, after that. Donate your hard-earned money that you make. Even though we make 100 times more than you do, donate all your money to the corrupt politicians, and they're going to save your situation. To me, that's the problem with the country when you talk about just political system.
Exactly. like Kiko. And I will say, politicians do help people. They're rich friends, but that's pretty much it. Maybe the gas companies that bribe them into not doing anything about climate change. But those two are pretty much it. They don't help anyone who actually needs it. And look at what it's caused. We have rich Harvard graduates and students who drive in their Mercedes and spend all their parents' hard earned money thinking it's okay to act like an animal on a college campus. We have division and riots pretty much 24/7 due to race and other petty issues. We have organizations that are focused on furthering that negativity. So if we had a politician that could stop all that and try to bring back sunshine on earth, we would most likely never have to worry about division again, in my opinion.
I don't think that the division is, I don't think that the division is necessarily fueled from the people themselves. I just think the issues are thrown in the mainstream and people have opinions about it and they become racialized because we all come from different sort of perspectives. But just because something's racialized doesn't have to mean, it doesn't mean there's necessarily racist. It just means that that discussion hasn't really been crossed or had like the way it needs to be had. I don't think that there's an overall like serious problem with that. I think it's more historical, and each generation has to confront it differently. Each generation has to confront this differently. In Stephen's generation, race relations were at a very different point. They've gotten better. I know that we like to say that race relations have gotten worse. They've gotten better. There's no way that we can say things have gotten worse because we work alongside each other and stuff. We live in the same neighborhoods more so than we did back then. So back then it wasn't like that. Things were way more segregated. Like my parents grew up in segregation. So we can't say that things are getting worse. They're not. That's just what the media wants us to believe. But what is getting worse is the dialogue, the breakdown in communication and discourse. But when we disagree about something, we're not civil enough to talk it through for whatever reason. It's just like we go in these echo chambers and it's like we're literally just trying to find someone that has our point of view. Like, okay, that person has my point of view. I can sleep at night now. That person agrees with me. I can sleep at night. But just because you agree with somebody, let's talk about things that we don't agree with. Even if people that you hang out with agree with you on things, what do we not agree about? And why don't we agree on this issue? And what can we do to at least have a better idea about what that person's feeling or experiencing? I just think now it's just like, it's so one-sided.
But you know why we don't have that? I'm going to tell you why. Because after the riots in 2020, and then we had the election, President Biden, and I think he meant well, he promised that if I'm elected, I'm going to bring both, to do exactly what you want. I'm going to bring both sides together. We'll have discussion. We'll be able to understand each other's point of view. The first thing he could have done, bring in law enforcement and the Black community together, have some set of rules. Like if a guy's running for a weapon or something, the cops should shoot him in the leg, shouldn't shoot him 10 times in the head or whatever. He promised to do that and he did nothing. He had this great opportunity, President Biden, when he went into office, he had some popularity, he had some political capital. He could have brought law enforcement and the Black community and other groups together. He could have brought people together who disagree on abortion, who disagree on climate change, who disagree on guns, who disagree on anything. He did nothing. You know why? Because he needs, the left wing of his party is so in control of that party. If he brought those people together, he'd lose the whole left wing of his party, the lunatic fringe on his party, who's now running the party that hates Israel, hates America. He would lose their support. He had to keep the pro-left wing support instead of bringing people together the way Bill Clinton did, if you remember, and the way Ronald Reagan did together. They brought people together. Joe Biden could have very easily brought people together on every single issue to try to find compromise. And you know what? Kate and I talk about this. There is compromise on every one of these issues. On immigration, there's compromise. You keep the border completely closed, but the immigrants that are here, the dreamers, the ones that are trying to become Americans, they love America, you let them go through the system, and the ones that are at the border, you put them through the system that my grandparents and great-grandparents went through, instead of what it's like now. In other words, keep the bad ones out, the drug smugglers and the human traffickers out, but leave the good immigrants in. Neither party has suggested that. The Democrats want every illegal alien in here because they're going to vote Democrat, and the Republicans want them all out because a lot of them are bigoted. That's just a fact. And nobody's brought up a compromise on that. Ronald Reagan would have. Bill Clinton would have. Nobody's compromising on guns. Bring back the Brady Bill, which allowed semi-automatic weapons, but disallowed the automatic weapons that are causing all these killings. And the Brady Bill elapsed during the Clinton side, and it lapsed during W. And Congress never, because it was Republican, never put it back into force. That's why you have all these automatic weapons in the hands of lunatics. There's compromise on abortion even. You can set something that, you know how you know something's a good compromise and both sides don't like it. Like the Brady Bill, when they passed that, the gun nuts and the gun grabbers, they hated it. That's when you knew it was a good bill, because Clinton sat down with Bob Dole and Newt Gingrich, and they found this really good bill where you had to have background checks and you had to disallow automatic weapons. Mm-hmm. There's compromise, even abortion, where there's good points on both sides. This compromise, you can make it a 12-week or a 10-week or whatever, where the girl has 2 months where she misses her period, she has plenty of time to get a test and get an abortion. There's compromise on everything, but the problem is the far right has taken over the Republican Party, the far left has taken over the Democratic Party, and there's not only polarization between the two parties, there's polarization within each party from the left and the right. And just real quickly to respond to what you said about money, you're totally right. In Britain there's no money in the elections, and it's pretty much the money's given by the government, whoever wants to run, but they only have two parties there. So they have it's a good system. And Ross Perot ran on that, if you're old enough to remember, on taking the money out. Okay. But unfortunately,
41, I remember.
Because of the Citizens United Supreme Court case, they ruled that these super PACs are your constitutional right. And here's the logic of it. If you're a regular person without much money, but you feel very strongly about, say, abortion or guns or immigration, anything, you don't have the money to run a super PAC, but you can give $20 or $30 or $50, $100 to a super PAC, to who speaks for you. And the Supreme Court ruled, they don't rule 9-0 on anything. They ruled 9-0 that this was the only way, this was freedom of speech. The McCain-Feingold, which barred negative ads, whatever, was declared unconstitutional. And the reason why these ads are so negative is because the super PACs now, they go through the IRS and not the FEC, meaning they're 501c3s, they're charities. Mm-hmm. And if you run a charity, you are not allowed to advocate the election of candidate A. You're not allowed. But you are allowed to say that candidate B is a pedophile, screws his dog, anything you want. That's why it's all negative. It legally has to be negative to be allowed on the air. You cannot advocate because of they're now 501c3s. So you're right that it's a terrible system, but under this system, that's all we have. And as long as the Supreme Court rules that that's the system, we have to work under that system. So unfortunately, so a lot of people, you have to choose between two bad alternatives. So you have to decide which one, the lesser of two evils or whatever. And
that's why what you're saying doesn't make sense about you get like the far right, the far left. I just think that those are sort of red herrings, and those are things that they like to try to plant into people's heads. I don't believe in a far right or a far left. I believe that people are fed up with the state of the country, and you can put whatever label you want to put on it. I just know that when I talk to people, we have a lot of commonality. Even though we may not identify the same way, we agree on a lot of the same stuff, but this system takes that power away from the people. to where you don't have a variance in thought.
The people agree. I agree. The people compromise and agree, but not the politicians. You're going to tell me that the far left of the Democratic Party that wants to get rid of police, that wants all criminals out on the streets, you're going to tell me that they're not far left?
They're not far. The Democrat is not a far left party because they're because they get fueled by the same people the Republicans get fueled by. Kadin made the point earlier. The fossil fuel industry is all over both parties. So whether someone's saying in the street saying they want to end fossil fuels or whatever, it doesn't matter what they say. Their party is saying something completely different because they're bringing in the funding from the fossil fuel industry. So at that point, it's just speaking. People are good with their words. They say things, but the actions aren't lining up with their words. And that's the point I'm making. Democrats say certain things and Republicans say certain things. But at the end of the day, Goldman Sachs, if you look at opensecrets.org, it's not a coincidence that Goldman Sachs will give 51% of their money to this side, 49% to this side. This corporation will give 45%, 55%. There's always a split because they want to keep both sides bought out. And so really, at that point, when you're choosing a candidate, it doesn't matter the candidate you're choosing because the party that you're selecting is they're supported by mega corporations that have no interest in helping everybody else out. They're just interested in helping the business out. It's just a business model at that point. It's not helping the people. And that's kind of where I'm getting at is I understand that the rhetoric is different, but I believe that it's a psychological move that keeps both systems in place. I think that's what it is. And maybe I'm looking at it from a strictly psychological angle, but I think at that point we have to look at it from a different way because there's no reason why these candidates and this is the thing about Trump. I've told people this before. The most frustrating thing I've had with Trump, I'm not a Trump supporter clearly, but I would give Trump a lot of credibility if he ran independent, third party. He's done that in the past, but he doesn't want to do that because he doesn't want to tip over the apple cart. He knows if he runs independent, he's splitting the vote. And that's the threat of the two-party system. That's killing the two-party system. If someone like Trump decided to say, you know what, fuck the Republicans, I'm not going to be a Republican, I'm going to go independent, people will go in chaos because that would threaten the system. Because what do you do then? When you have another outlet, people flee to that outlet, and then the red and the blue side are saying to themselves, what do we do now? They don't want that. They don't want options for the people. They want to keep this system the way it is. And one more thing before you all continue. I ask Trump people all the time, when Trump is out of office, let's just say he wins this election. 4 years later, what happens after that? Trump can't be in office forever. It's still going to be the same Republican Party. That's the thing about it. There's no end in sight. Even if Trump is a different type of Republican, it's still going to be another Republican that gets in after him. So it's going to be the system back to where it was before.
Well, hopefully, do you know who the one president was in our lifetimes? The only president that passed a tax reform bill where it got rid of all of the loopholes and the tax. Billionaires don't pay taxes and billion-dollar companies don't pay taxes. There was 6 years when they did pay taxes. Between 1986 and 1992. Ronald Reagan passed tax reform in 86. Do you know he cut every person in America's taxes? We only had three brackets. The highest one was 8%. Can you imagine? And it was 28, 25, and 15 or something like that. If you made $25,000 or less, after all your deductions, which is like 60 or 70,000 today, you paid zero taxes. And so everybody paid less taxes. And do you know why it was revenue neutral? Why it didn't put us in a deficit? You know how he made up that money to pay everybody a tax cut? Can I say anything I want on the air? He fucked the big businesses and the special interests, even though they gave him and Dan Rostenkowski, who was his counterpart, the head of the Ways and Means Committee, that made this deal. And he got Democrat support and Republican support. They really screwed over They took away all the tax shelters and all the loopholes that now allowed billionaires to not pay taxes. So for 6 years, we did have what you want, where they didn't have all this power. But as the situation is now, not one presidential candidate, except for Bernie Sanders, has brought up bringing back the Reagan tax cuts of '86, which now, then if you remember, in Bush's fourth year, Bush 1, he reversed Reagan's tax cuts when he broke his Read My Lips pledge, and he put us, we're now back in the 9 brackets that we were before.
The 9 brackets
but for at least
before.
a few years, we did have that perfect system that you just talked about. It can be done. And it was done by the goodwill of politicians in both parties. It wasn't just Reagan. On the Democratic side, Bill Bradley and Gephardt were the heroes. On the Republican side, Kemp and Roth signed on to this bill. And they've had to pass it in the middle of the night, if you remember, because the lobbyists were out there. They didn't know. They thought they could stop it. But in the middle of the night, they signed this thing. And George Bush 1, who had a 90% approval rating after Kuwait, why he screwed this up, I still don't know. And that's how Clinton got elected, because it wasn't because Bush raised taxes. It was because the tax act threw the country into a recession in the last year. And that's how Clinton got elected. He only had 43%, but Ross Perot had 20% siphoned off the votes. But Perot was the only one in my lifetime that's brought up what you just said, getting money out of the political system like they do in Great Britain. And it can be done, but you have to elect a third-party candidate. What you said about Trump is true. As you know, he was a registered Democrat until the day he ran for president. But you have to be practical. If you want to be president, he realized he had a better chance on the Republican side because a weak field. But he could have run and won as an independent. You're right about that. Totally could have. But he didn't even realize, I don't think at the time, how much support he would get. And the Republicans would have put up Jeb Bush or Marco Rubio or somebody, or Ted Cruz. And he, as a third-party candidate, you agree, against Hillary, would have easily beaten those two. We could have had him as really a people's friend, but he didn't think of that. So now, as a Republican, he had to get reelected. He has to take Republican sides on issues like abortion, where he's always been pro-choice his whole life. Now, he's never even said he's pro-life. You ever notice that? He kind of backtracked, but he pointed those judges that overturned Roe. But you know what? Abortions have actually gone up since they overturned Roe. So you can't say that that's really taking women's rights to choose away. It's kind of a compromise and leave it up to the states, which is actually not a bad thing. But you're right. We need either a third-party candidate, if Trump was a third-party candidate, who can bring a middle ground, bring folks together, or we need the Republicans and the Democrats to do what they did in '86 with Reagan's tax cut, where the big money people's power was diminished because they got rid of all their loopholes and their tax shelters. So I think we can agree on that.
Yeah, I can agree with some of that for sure. It's an overall, it's a huge issue because I think it spills into the cultural issues. I think a lot of the stuff that we see in the mainstream media is culture war based. And that's even now undertone of that with the Palestine and the Gaza and Israel. It's like, depending on who you talk to, people in Israel are just like horrible people. And I don't agree with that, but I also get a lot of the Palestinians this, the Palestinians that. I'm like, those are still people at the end of the day, like dying over there. Like the IDF, they're still killing a lot of people. Like, it's not just Hamas doing this there's a lot of innocent people. I mean, in all sorts of conflicts and wars, and there's more innocent people dying than there are guilty people. I guess the point I'm making. And I think people are seeing that, and I think that's why a lot of people are so upset about this situation. I think there's an anti-war humanitarian sentiment in the country that's becoming revived. And I don't think it's necessarily a left-right thing. I just think people are just upset. People don't want to see this destruction anymore. And we need some kind of a reset to where we're focused on the U.S. economy, we're focused on issues over here, and we're not bombing people every second, droning people to death every second in another place. Whether it's Israel, Gaza, I think that's what the average person is saying to themselves. At least the people I talk to, I don't necessarily hold those views that I just expressed, but I'm just saying people that I normally wouldn't agree with them things are just they're sick of these wars and they're sick of our money going to things that are really just funding people dying. Like they're tired of seeing that stuff.
Exactly. Aren't we all in today's society? Not just in other places of the world, but here for that matter too, because we have people dying over here as well of starvation, gun violence, riots,
The
that kind of
healthcare
thing.
system.
Exactly.
But like I said, we don't. But we're not even focusing on like I can't tell you like the lack of conversation I've heard about healthcare. Everything just seems to be about. I guarantee the debates that are coming up soon is going to be all about quote unquote foreign policy, which to me is a euphemism for basically war, 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 war. When's the next war going to be? When's World War III going to be? To me, when I hear foreign policy, that's what it sounds like. There's no diplomacy whatsoever. We're not talking about let's get together at the table, let's discuss things through. It's always this side versus that side attacking that side. Is never. You mean to tell me we can't have discussions about things? Like it just automatically goes to war, like every time? Because there's money in war. It funds these economies. Like the wars, there's no money in peace. There's money in war. Like, and that sounds so sinister, but that to me, that's what the military industrial complex has kind of realized that we can just keep these wars going because we need them for economic purposes. It doesn't matter the people that die. We just need to keep the economies going. And that's something that Trump at one point, he talked about the manufacturing base being depleted in the United States. And that's why I mean a lot of the Trump people are having a different conversation that you're having because they're not even thinking on those issues that you're discussing about like Hamas, and they're thinking about the economy and other things. They're not even talking about these things that you're discussing. And I think that's where there's a big disconnect.
I have a question for you then. I agree with everything you just said. As the world's only real superpower since the collapse of the Soviet Union, what are we supposed to do after that Hamas attack, number one, against Israel? If you think nothing, that's okay. And what are we supposed to do about the fact that only one country is really a threat with a nuclear weapon to cause World War III, and that's Iran? Just let it lay there? If we used what you just said to the farthest degree, we would have just let Hitler roll down Europe, and he would have had the atomic bomb before us, and you and I would be speaking German right now. So even though
I've heard that, yeah.
You're right that the domestic stuff is more important, and we should be. But still, as the world's only superpower, we have a responsibility. Especially, look at what we've gone through in our history. Much worse than this. The Cold War, World War II, World War I. We're 10 times. The world's very peaceful today compared to that. There's only one threat in the whole world of a nuclear holocaust, and that's Iran. So, should we just do nothing and allow them to get strong in events, which will eventually lead them to have the ability to put a nuclear thing on a warhead?
But see, but you're assuming. But see, we're a nuclear country too. That's the thing about it. It's hard for people when we live. We're all from the United States, but I'm saying we have to. If we think in terms of just globally, everyone doesn't think like that. Like we're in the West, and there's a West-East divide. Clearly, there's a West-East divide. But that's the problem, is that we've never gotten over. It's like the Cold War never ended because we're only focused on what's happening here, but not everywhere else. But that's also like people in the East may think, well, the United States is a nuclear threat to us. I mean, it can't be just like we see the East as a threat and we're the good people, because we do have nuclear capability. So, but that's what I'm saying.
We're not going to drop a nuclear weapon on. That's not what America is. It's not even what China or Russia is.
We nuked Japan. We nuked Japan.
What?
We nuked Japan. What are you talking about?
You know why? Because if we didn't, we would have had to go to a ground war where millions and millions of people would have died, much more than the 70,000 that were killed in those two atomic. That was, if we had to go to a ground war, there would have been millions of casualties, and it ended the war a lot quicker, and there was peace. And you know who our best friend is for the last 50 years? Economically? Japan. The people that we bombed. And the Germans. So that was a choice Truman had to make. It's a tough choice, and both alternatives obviously are bad. But we only did that because we had to do that at that time. But we're not the type that's just going to aggressively, for no reason, attack another. That was a defensive measure to end the war. Because the Japanese were crazy. They were never going to surrender under any circumstances. But today, it's not America's style or Russia's style or China's style to actually drop a bomb. They're not going to do it.
No, we use proxy wars to do that now. We use proxy wars.
What's that?
We use proxy wars. We don't do the dirty work. We let other people do the dirty work.
Yeah, but they're not dropping nuclear weapons. Iran hasn't
droning people though. Like there are lots of drone campaigns going on now, and these drones are very powerful. They're very targeted towards certain, and a lot of times, like I said, the civilians are the ones that are getting killed. That's just like the Hamas stuff. I mean, when I first heard this idea about Israel going after Hamas, I'm saying to myself, so what they're saying is that they're going to basically kill all the Palestinians until they get the people that they want to get, which is crazy. That's an absurd idea to me. I get that you were attacked, but it's like, so you're going to kill 30,000 like innocent people to get 100 people? Like, to me, that I just can't wrap my head around that that you got to be killing like civilian complete neighborhoods to get who? I mean, if the people are underground, how are you going to get them that way anyway? It's like, I don't know. To me, it was never a good premise to begin with.
But the reason that situation is because Hamas embeds themselves in urban areas with civilians that uses them as human shields, knowing that if Israel goes in and bomb to do anything to defend themselves, there's going to be a ton of casualties. And it has worked for them thus far. World opinion is mostly on Hamas's side, even though they're the ones that were chopping off babies' heads. And, this girl that got rescued yesterday, this Israeli girl, you notice she's not talking to the press, but she's been gang raped. Like, her story's not going to come out for a long time for respect to the family or whatever. The Israelis don't do that. The murders they commit, if you want to call them murder, the killings of the innocent civilians, they're not for the sake of killing civilians. They're because we have to try to get their hostages out, and they have to defeat Hamas. Whereas the other side, when they do their terrorist attack on Hamas against innocent Israelis and innocent Americans and other countries, it's for the sake of killing innocent people. You see the difference, right?
But what about all the operations that led up to that? What about all the operations that Israel had used against Palestine before that? Operation Cast Lead, Operation, there's so many different operations that they've done. They call them operations, but basically they just go in and they drop sulfur bombs, they drop phosphorus bombs. I mean, just like, it seems like almost at random towards like I said, this has been going on for 76 years. This is not new.
Right, but is their purpose to kill innocent people?
No, absolutely.
It's not. Where that is the purpose of Hamas, to kill innocent people.
Yeah, but when you throw bombs in neighborhoods, you're going to kill people inevitably. Is the point I make.
No, but there's a difference between intentionally killing innocent people, which is what terrorists do, and killing innocent people because they're caught in the middle because they're there, and the bad guys are using them as human shields or as whatever you want to call it, collateral damage. Israel and America have not killed one Palestinian for the purpose of killing a civilian.
Yeah, but
Hamas
the cemeteries look the same. That's the point I'm making. The cemeteries look the same. It doesn't matter the method. It's still madness, if you ask me. Like, it's just a different method of using the madness. But that, I think that's where we have an ideological difference. I just think that if we just kind of did our thing and just allowed these countries, if Israel's its own country, its own nation, then Israel needs to defend itself. Like I'm sorry, it just does. We don't need to be giving money to Israel every year like we have in the budget already. The military budget is ridiculous as it is, which to me it just gives more incentive to just keep wars going, to keep the missile programs going. They trade these companies on the stock market. Lockheed, Boeing, all these companies are traded publicly. And so it's like there's incentive to use the weapons. There's no incentive to not use the weapons because the stock market depends on it now. Like you have to make the investors happy. You have to make them happy. So all this stuff is so connected. And that's why I say, I think Trump's original message about the manufacturing base is a good message because we need a reset to an earlier point. That's anti-war. We don't need wars. We just don't. But not just the human destruction, but we need to focus on building our economy here and stop worrying about what happens in every single situation in Israel, Ukraine, wherever it may be in the world. I think it's just created just more problems than it's solved.
No, I think we see each other's sides. We just have an honest difference of opinion. I believe that if we do what you said, eventually, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, Iran will have a nuclear weapon.
You think that they're going to use it?
You see my side too. I totally see your side too. But we have to deal with the reality of who the bad guys are today. And again, like I said before, in World War II, America was also very isolationist, and Roosevelt ran on his third term on the promise not to go in.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but if he hadn't gone in, like I said, we'd be speaking German today. So what do you do about a country like Iran? They are the only ones. I'm asking your opinion. I'm curious. What do we do? Just leave them alone? They're going to have. If we do, they will have a nuclear weapon, and they will use it. Who knows where? They could. It could come. It'll first go to the NATO countries and then come here. Do we just wait for that to happen, or do we try to, as Barney Fife said? Did you watch Andy Griffith's show?
I love it.
Yeah, I grew up with that.
We got it in the book. That was what Barney Fife used to. It's you see my side. If we don't do something right now that could be very fast, this thing will just continue. You understand? And you're right. We shouldn't have to be dealing with all these wars. And you're right about the military-industrial complex, but that's part of the system. It's corrupt, okay? But if you don't do anything and just let Hamas kill all those innocent Israelis and leave it up and just leave it to Netanyahu, it's gonna get it. We've been kind of trying to make peace between them over there, and we've been kind of a mediator, I suppose, and Egypt and Qatar, which is good. And you're right that we shouldn't have to be worrying about that. We should worry about what's happening here. But eventually, what's happening there is going to affect us over here if Iran gets a nuclear weapon. That's my point.
Kadin, I knew you had some stuff to add for sure.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. As much as we don't want to take out civilians in Iran, unfortunately, if we don't want Iran to get a nuke, we gotta take out at least Hamas. And also, guys, we gotta wrap it up in a bit. My laptop's about to die, and I gotta go up for family dinner. Happy fam, happy life, I always say.
So that was the ad, beautiful people. And again, you all know how the show goes or whatever. Like, I bring on different types of people, and Stephen and Kadin showed interest into the show, and that's the reason why I thought it was good for them to come on. And I also want to learn about super PACs and stuff, and I really want to talk a lot about that. We end up talking about completely different topics. We have lots of different audiences, and I think that there will be points of this conversation that won't resonate, and there will be points that will resonate with people. But I guess in the spirit of what we were saying earlier, you really never know what you're getting into unless you engage conversation with people. And
we have to hear each other's opinion. We have to hear, otherwise there's never going to be any kind. We have to engage, which we're doing, which is great.
But I don't agree with partly any of what we talked about. No, I won't say that. I agree with some things that we discussed for sure. And I just, when I see the Super PAC, I'm just like, oh gosh, I have so much in my head that I want to respond to. Like I totally don't agree with it, but at the same time, it's intriguing because there's definitely a production value to it, and there's a lot that goes into these Super PACs. But I was surprised that it has nothing to do with the Trump campaign, because I know that it's a pro-Trump ad, but it's not connected with Trump. And you explained that earlier, how the Citizens United decision, you talked about that. And I think that's the audience, that's kind of what they're going to get from that as far as the Super PACs are concerned, because someone that works on the inside of that, I think that's intriguing, because people like yourself are the reason why we get those ads. We may be watching a game or watching a show on TV, and then you get this smear ad, and people like yourself are the ones behind those.
Well, the word sounds more scary than it is, You hear Super PAC.
Well, I mean, it is. It is. I mean, it's negative. It's very negative.
But it's people mostly of modest means giving their money to add up to, because they can't afford. And it's freedom of speech, and we have it on both sides, equal amount of money on both sides going into it. It was started by George Soros, by the way, on the Democratic side, the whole Super PAC idea. So that was and now that both parties do it.
So you're saying that most of the contributions to Sunshine on Earth are just from like everyday people?
Pretty much.
Yeah.
The people that contribute money to these things are to presidential campaign. It's mostly, you do have your billionaires in there, obviously. Trump's been getting some billionaires in the last couple, since his conviction. But most of the Super PAC money of all Super PACs comes from people of modest means. Well, any PAC, doesn't have to be a Super PAC. That's the whole idea of a PAC, is that people of modest means who can't afford to make a difference with their $10, they can give it to somebody to help them air this type of ad. And the people that take the other side of me have the same First Amendment rights to do it.
So what makes this a Super PAC versus a PAC? What makes it a Super PAC versus a PAC?
Say that again?
What makes this a Super PAC versus a PAC? What's the difference?
There's no limits on what a contributor can give.
Oh, and a PAC is limited.
Yes.
Yeah. Dollars, I think, per corporation. I think $2,000 per person or something. I'm not sure the exact number, something like that.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. I never knew. See, I didn't look into that a whole lot, but that answers a lot of questions right there. Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense.
And the Super PACs that are through the IRS that I talked about, the other thing that's kind of weird about those is what's called dark money. When you contribute money to a charity, it's anonymous. So you have a problem on both sides. People don't know, but this one is not this one was done through the FEC. So this is not done through the IRS.
I'm almost done. Oh, sorry guys. So we really got
no problem. So we're in it here, beautiful people. This is a wonderful episode 124. This episode will release within the next day or two. Kadin, I appreciate you coming on to the show, and Stephen, thanks for coming on to the show. And it should turn some heads, this episode 124. But beautiful people, stay tuned. We got a lot of other shows coming on down the road, and enjoy the rest of your day. Cheers, everybody.
Bye.